Hello everyone. Tonight is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. I'm not even going to try to recap this past week. It seems that from last Wednesday until this Wednesday, I don't know what I did or what happened. There were so many events passing through my head this week that I decided to go to bed and release everything to the Lord. I was fatigued and exhausted, a bit lethargic, and I slept a lot. So that is what happened to me. How about you? How was your time spent last week? All I'm able to say tonight is, Jesus, build a fence all around me every day, please. Tonight, our lesson is a continuation of Jeremiah. I will be talking about things that are not so delightful. For the next few weeks, it seems strange to me that when I heard in the news about people accused of eating children, I realized that I had to read scripture tonight about people who sacrificed their children to the gods Molech and Baal. I said, God, I know when you told Jeremiah to let the people know of your hatred toward what they were doing and how they were going to be punished, this was a very serious thing. You knew what you were doing, and you knew what you were saying. But when I hear of people on the internet accusing certain other people of doing similar things, it breaks my heart. Why? Because you also know what the people are doing. Those who are making accusations out here today do not have the same capability of an all-knowing, all-seeing, everywhere God that you are. None of us are in a position to make wild generalizations about one another. We don't know what we're talking about. Can I get an amen out there? Remember what I said last week. The heart is very deceitful. I plan to read the scriptures now and go into a discussion on them after each chapter is read. The highlights come from commentaries that I feel are very helpful in helping us understand the meaning of scriptures. This is some good information. Please bear with me. I'm going to go into Jeremiah 19 tonight. The sign of the potter's house is continued. We talked about how he went down to the potter's house last week. What I did not understand was God uses objects as lessons to compare to the human being. You remember about the girdle when he told him to go down and hide the girdle in the rocks and everything? That was a lesson for us. Because when the girdle came out, it was good for nothing. Well, this potter's house is a lesson that God is telling Jeremiah that I want you to preach about. In one of your messages, Jeremiah, I need you to use this potter and the pot as an example of what it is that I'm trying to explain to the people that don't want to listen, don't have any desire to listen to what I have to say. So I want you to listen very carefully, and it's basically, it's something that I hadn't thought about. Okay, I just thought he said go down to the potter's house, and the potter makes you and you'll be all right. But there's another lesson to this story. In verse 2, we're going to talk about the valley of Hinnom, and it means a place of fire. It also means that we're going to be talking about the idols that are made of iron and stone. And there are a lot of different things in the valley of Hinnom that it turned a lot of purposes for that. But if you remember, I'm talking to my Bible students now. If you remember when we went through the book of Nehemiah, how Jerusalem had about 9 or 10 gates there. We're going to be talking about the dung gate tonight, the pots herd, and that's the dung gate. And I found that very, very interesting that the Lord would pick that gate for Jeremiah to preach a sermon from, okay? So bear with me now. I'm going to go with Jeremiah 19, and we're going to start. And I'm hoping that I can get my little lessons and stuff or explanations done while we're talking, but I may not. And I'll do the explanations afterwards. But I would like for you to get your Bible tonight. We're going to do Jeremiah 19, and we're going to try to do Jeremiah 20. We may have to postpone that one until next week, okay? But just remember, before I start, let's remember, when you make a pot, something like this one has a large opening inside. Do you see that? So it means that when you fill it up, you can pour it out relatively fast, and pretty much people that are impatient can get their glass filled up pretty quick, okay? But when you make a pot like this is a pot. It has a very narrow hole in it, and you can only get a certain amount out at one time. But just the other thing that I want you to think about is when a pot like this is made, while it is malleable and soft on the wheel, if a mistake is made, that can be corrected just like that, very quickly. But when you break this, it's done, okay? There's nothing you can do to put this back together. You might try to glue some pieces, but the other fragments of it, you'll never get this back the way it was. So when the Lord made us, he made us the way he made us, all right? But there will come a point when the pot becomes the person. I want you to think about that, okay? Just remember that once it's broken, once it's hard and broken, it can't be done. I'm going to say that several times. Some of the references that I'm using tonight is from one of the pastors in the Blue Letter Bible. His name is Gusick, and he has a lot of information, and there are different pastors that made comments on that commentary. So I'm not taking credit for anything that I'm about to say tonight. I didn't write the Bible, and I didn't write the commentaries. I'm going to share them with you as it applies to the scriptures. So Jeremiah 19, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord, go and get a potter's earthen bottle, and take of the ancients of the people, and of the ancients of the priests. Okay? We're talking about ancient. That's old. That's the word I'm trying to pronounce tonight. Number 2 says, and go forth unto the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is by the entry of the east gate, and proclaim there the words that I shall tell thee. So this is a message to Jeremiah from the Lord, and he's telling me, now I taught you a lesson back in chapter 18. I told you to go and watch the potter make the pot, okay? Now, I want you to go back to that same potter's house, and I want you to pick up a finished product. I want you to pick up a finished product, and I want you to bring it back, and I want you to take this to the entry of the east gate, and I want you to say the words that I'm going to tell you to talk about, okay? Number 3, and say, hear ye the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will bring evil upon this place, the which whosoever heareth, his ears shall tingle. So that's telling us something about the fierceness of what God is going to do. And basically, he's talking to the kings. Do you wonder why he's talking to the people that are in leadership? He's talking to the kings, and the way that it goes, he's talking to them, and I'm going to explain that a little later, but the kings controlled the atmosphere. The king controlled everything that the people did. They were in charge. So he's talking to the whole dynasty of them. If I was the king, anything I did, I'm talking to you about it because you let down on me. I'm talking to you about what your son, when he was king, did. And I'm talking to you about what your other son, when he was king, what your uncle did, and all of that other stuff, okay? So he's talking about a dynasty here. And he's saying, hear ye the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel. Behold, I will bring evil upon this place, the which whosoever heareth, his ears shall tingle, because they have forsaken me, and have estranged this place, and have burned incense in it unto other gods, whom neither they nor their father have known, nor the kings of Judah, and have filled this place with the blood of innocents. The kings were guilty of sinning just like their people were. And the kings led people into sinning, okay? So the practices that were set up by the kings, the people were permitted to do, all right? And this is, I mean, I couldn't have picked this out by myself, but it just happened to fall on today, okay? So then it says, they have built also the high places of Baal, to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal, which I commanded not, nor spake it, neither came it into my mind. That's verse 5. The Lord said, all these evil things that you all have done, I never commanded you to do it. I never spoke about doing the horrible things, and it never came to my mind. God never thought to tell them anything about destroying their own children, but through their evilness and their deceitful hearts, they figured that they would do this, and this is how they would pay homage to Molech and Baal. He said in verse 5, tell them this, they have built also the high places of Baal to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings unto Baal. And I just read that one, I'm sorry. Which I commanded not, nor spake it, neither came it into my mind. Verse 6, therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that this place shall no more be called Tophet, nor the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. Okay? And I will make void the counsel of Judah and Jerusalem in this place. And I will cause them to fall by the sword before their enemies, and by their hands of them that seek their lives. And their carcasses will I give to be meat for the fowls of the heaven, and for the beasts of the earth. And I will make this city desolate and a hissing. Every one that passeth thereby shall be astonished, and hiss, because of all the plagues thereof. You know how people look at something and say, Well, I don't know if that's a hiss or not, but when you pass by something and you see it's ridiculous looking, or something is terrible or something, you kind of make some type of sign or symbol regarding that. Verse 10, then shalt thou break the bottle in the sight of the men that go with thee. So in other words, I want you to go to the gate, and I want you to stand at the valley of Hinnom, and that's I'm going to explain to you what Hinnom is in a few moments. But I want you to take this bottle, and after you say those few words that I just told you to say, I want you to drop this bottle and break it right there, and let them see the bottle be broken. Okay? In other words, I'm going to do you just like Jeremiah's about to do to this bottle. I'm going to break it. And I want to show you that once it's broken, it can't be put back together. So some of you won't be put back together. Some terrible things are going to happen to you. Verse 11, and shall say unto them, thus saith the Lord of hosts, even so will I break this people and this city, as one breaketh a potter's vessel, that cannot be made whole again, and they shall bury them in Tophet, till there be no place to bury. So it looks like there's going to be so many people that are going to be killed that there will be no more burial places for their bodies. I'm hoping I'm doing this in the right way. I've got a lot of papers here tonight. Verse 12, thus will I do unto this place, saith the Lord. Not only am I going to do it to the people, I'm going to do it to this entire city, saith the Lord, and to the inhabitants thereof, and even make this city as Tophet. And the houses of Jerusalem and the houses of the kings of Judah shall be defiled as the place of Tophet, because all of the houses upon whose roofs they have burned incense unto all the host of heaven, and have poured out drink offerings unto other gods. Then came Jeremiah from Tophet, whither the Lord had sent him to prophesy. And he stood in the court of the Lord's house and said to all the people. So he came from Tophet, and then he went into the temple. He went to the Lord's house. And all the people in there, here's what he said, verse 15. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will bring upon this city and upon all her towns all the evil that I have pronounced against it, because they have hardened their necks, and that they might not hear my words. This is chapter 19. I have some comments about chapter 19 that I want to share with you. I may not get through all of them, but I'm going to try to get through a few of them tonight, okay? In verses 1 through 2, Jeremiah was getting prepared for the message. The Lord had told him, go back down to the potter's house and get an earthen vessel for me. So in the process of that, it says, the earthen flask was probably a small clay bottle with a narrow neck. I just thank God that I had this bottle in the house. It's a small bottle and it's got a narrow neck. Is that right? It was easily broken and could not be repaired if broken. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us. That comes from 2 Corinthians 4 and 7. Paul's point was that the treasure and glory of God is set inside common and ordinary receptacles. So what did I just say? The excellence of the power may be of God and not of us. The treasure and glory of God is set inside of us. That's something to think about, okay? Inside common and ordinary receptacles. So tonight, we are all receptacles. And if we yield ourselves to the Lord, then He will place His treasure and glory inside of these common and ordinary receptacles. And after that, we would become His redeemed people. Jeremiah's point, however, is different. Having come from the potter's house, God showed him how the potter could mold clay again into a new shape if it should seem resistant. Here, the clay is baked, hardened, and breakable. If there is nothing so workable as a clay pot in the making, there is nothing so unalterable as the finished article. If it is wrong by then, that's that. And this is Pastor Kidner said that. So here we are. Go out to the valley of the son of Hinnom. Twice previously in Jeremiah 2:23 and 7:31, Jeremiah made mention of this terrible place, south of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Now that was God's house. It was used as both, this is what the valley was used as, a garbage dump with continually smoldering fires, and previously as a place of child sacrifice. The valley of Ben Hinnom, south of Jerusalem, as a contemporary locale for Molech worship. Under Josiah, the shrine was destroyed, and later on the valley was used for burning garbage and cremating bodies of criminals. This was Pastor Harris that mentioned that. In the New Testament, there's a word called Gehenna. It is a Greek word borrowed from the Hebrew language. Jesus spoke of hell as Gehenna, referring to this place outside Jerusalem's walls, desecrated by Molech worship and human sacrifice. I didn't know that I was going to be talking about human sacrifice or child sacrifice tonight, but I don't do that. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other people that don't do that. There may be some on this planet that still practice those satanic rituals, but I don't do that, okay? It was also a garbage dump where rubbish and refuse were burned. The smoldering fires and festering worms of the valley of Hinnom made it a graphic and effective picture of the fate of the damned. So what we're saying here is that even though there's a possibility that this vessel could be filled with the glory of God and the treasures of God, this vessel has also turned into a garbage dump for the wiles of the devil. There's some things that the devil can put inside of your vessel that can pollute you and cause you to be an abomination unto the Lord. And we need to understand that just as easily as you can pour good iced tea into the vessel, you can also put vinegar in here, but you can't drink a whole pitcher of vinegar. Okay? So just remember that. We want to be as careful as we can about the things that we allow inside of this vessel. All right? There's also, it said, when he was referring to it as human sacrifice, it was also a garbage dump where rubbish and refuse were burned. The smoldering fires and festering worms made it graphic and effective picture of the fate of the damned. This place was called the lake of fire in Revelations chapter 20, 13 through 15, prepared for the devil and his angels. Also in Matthew 25 and 41. Okay? The name Potsherd Gate, probably to be identified with the dung gate in Nehemiah chapter 2, 13. And this may indicate the valley was being used as a rubbish tip. And Pastor Kandal mentioned that. It may have acquired this name from the fact that the potters also, whose workshops were near the gate, dumped their broken vessels beyond the gate. So these are some things that we need to keep in mind with verses 1 and 2. Those were some, I never knew that a verse could hold so much meaning. And as you're studying this, as you're reading about this, it's amazing what you can learn if you would just sit down and take a look at what you're reading, okay? Verse 3. It says the beginning of the message at the potsherd gate. He used the plural kings, and this is what I was trying to tell you about the dynasties. He used the plural kings because the message was not only to the reigning king, but to the whole dynasty that was responsible for the apostasy. Pastor Feinberg said this. Do you know what apostasy is when you're in the state of apostasy? There's a scripture somewhere in the Bible about the falling away of the church. We get into an apostate condition. When you fall away from the principles that God has embedded in you to do, or when you fall away from ever learning the principles of God, then we're in a state of apostasy. And I think it would be safe to say that quite a bit of our people are in a state of apostasy as I'm speaking to you tonight. Do you remember the story of Ahaz in 2 Kings? He was the king of Israel. He actually sacrificed his son in the fire. The same thing happened in Manasseh's day. Children were sacrificed to gods of Canaan. That's in 2 Kings 21:6. Pastor Ryken said that. As before, God promised great destruction and catastrophe to come upon this place associated with idolatry and child sacrifice. I think about so many times how our children are suffering and they need help and they need food, they need clothing, and we need to cherish our kids, nourish them, help them to be the strong people that they can be if they live in the right conditions. God help us all to have a loving heart for our children. And when people abuse their children, God is looking at that. God looks down on that. And I feel so bad. There's so much kidnapping going on, so much around us that we cannot even keep up with the news about who's missing today and who's missing and whose body we found in the ditch somewhere. Those people that are committing these awful crimes, they're in an apostate condition. God is watching them. Okay, he's watching us as well. And further down in the chapters, verse 4 and 5, it says there was a reason for the catastrophe to come. God had promised great destruction and catastrophe to come upon the place. And the verb to make alien, the place had been denationalized so that it could not be recognized as Israelite. When people live out of the reference or the realm of who they are, you can't recognize them as who they are. You can't identify them as who they are. And it says either the practice of child sacrifice was more widespread than yet confirmed by the archaeologists. You see, they're digging up graves and bottles and stuff with bones in it now. And this was very horrendous to God. It says to burn their sons with fire for burnt offerings to Baal. Child sacrifice was associated with a Canaanite deity known as Molech. On some occasions, these offerings were also made to Baal. We mentioned that. The destruction of the sanctuary in the valley of Ben Hinnom in the days of Josiah is referred to specifically in 2 Kings 23:10. Evidently, the practice was revived under Jehoiakim, and it was to this that Jeremiah addressed himself. The offering of children to Baal under his title of king has sometimes been represented as a mere dedication rite, passing the child harmlessly over a flame toward the idol. But it leaves no doubt that these were actual burnt offerings, although not burnt alive. Unlike many Canaanite deities, Yahweh never commanded human sacrifice under no circumstances. God could say that it never did come into his mind to ask such a thing, and it totally went against his nature. The incident of Abraham's interrupted sacrifice of Isaac was an emphatic way for God to say, I do not want human sacrifice. So don't let anybody fool you and convince you that that's an okay thing to do. Following, we thought about Tophet as being another name for the Valley of Hinnom. It was a name that was associated with pagan practices and child sacrifice. I didn't know there was so much in one chapter, in 15 verses. God repeated a promise recorded that he would answer the idolatry of Judah and the outrageous practice of human sacrifice with devastating judgment. There would be a grotesque slaughter in that valley. The dead corpse in that place would also be disgraced by having no proper burial and by being food for scavenger birds and the beasts of the earth. If a person lives that bad and God says they deserve to be a corpse that has no burial ground and that there can be eaten by the birds and the beasts of the earth, that person's in bad shape. For the body to remain unburied, thereby provide food for the birds and the rodents, was a thing of unspeakable horror for the ancient Hebrews. It's still an unspeakable horror. Ironically, their sanctuary would become their cemetery as the treasured homeland was ravaged. I will make void the counsel, because this phrase in the original sounds like the word it used to describe the earthen flask. Some think that Jeremiah symbolically emptied the bottle as he said this. Okay? The prophet may have emptied the flask, but the catastrophe would be seen both in terms of the death of people and the destruction of the city. So when he broke the bottle, that should have sent a message to the people that you can be broken. You can be destroyed. There's nowhere to put the broken bottle. You can't put it back together again. And then he said the city would be reduced to cannibalism, even as Samaria, the former capital of Israel, under siege from the Assyrians, and promised as a curse upon disobedient Israel. All this would drive the people of Jerusalem to despair. God told Jeremiah to break the clay bottle as an illustration of the destruction to come. Okay? The clay bottle would break quickly and completely, and that is how God would bring judgment to Judah and Jerusalem. If a man or nation, in spite of all the patient grace of God, persists in courses of evil and rebellion, then he will break in pieces. To find the redeeming purpose of Jehovah, a tolerance of sin, is of all evils the most terrible. God wanted the demonstration done in the valley because this is where the corpse of the slaughtered would be thrown into mass pits. The Valley of Hinnom was a disgusting garbage dump and a place of burning. All Jerusalem would see that kind of destruction. They would be destroyed like the broken flask. Because the idolatry was spread throughout the city, God would bring this destruction throughout the city. Jeremiah called the kings and the rulers to hear him and to see him enact the prophecy of the broken flask. Probably few of them took the trouble to come. For those who did not come to hear and see him, guess what he did? He brought the message to them to the Lord's house. The greatest sin of Judah and Jerusalem was not their particular sins themselves. It was their rebellion and refusal to hear God and receive his word and correction. Their hand on their ear in their neck in the heart, and their heart in obstinacy. I heard someone say today, don't let arrogance dominate you. And that's what they had done. God had a plan for them. They failed because they would not follow God. And because of that, they were a lost nation. Okay? I'm going to try to do just a little bit more. I think we have a little time here to get this done. Jeremiah 20. That's another good chapter. But we've learned the lesson of the potter. The potter came from chapter 18 and 19. So when you're reading about the potter's house, you need to read both of those chapters at the same time to get a flow of what's going on there. He took him down to the potter's house in 18 to teach him how a vessel was made. And then he brought him back, sent him down to get one, and use the vessel as an object lesson to demonstrate to the people how easy it is to destroy that same vessel. Okay? Chapter 20. Now Pashur, the son of Immer, the priest, who was also chief governor in the house of the Lord, heard that Jeremiah prophesied these things. He heard about him down by the gate talking all that stuff. Then Pashur smote Jeremiah the prophet and put him in the stocks that were in the high gate of Benjamin, which was by the house of the Lord. So we know that up until now Jeremiah had pretty much just been able to say what he wanted to say, but Jeremiah had also indicated to God that people were out to get him. You remember that? They were conspiring, they were getting involved in a conspiracy to frame Jeremiah and get rid of him. Well, now they had an excuse, so they told Pashur, who was the chief governor in the house at the time, Pashur smote Jeremiah. In my notes tonight, some of it indicates that the smote meant that Jeremiah was struck 39 times on his back, which was symbolic of what they did to Jesus. Okay? But he was put in stocks. They were in the high gate of Benjamin, which was by the house of the Lord. Okay? And it came to pass on the morrow that Pashur brought forth Jeremiah out of the stocks. So he threw him in jail overnight. All right? And then it said, then said Jeremiah unto him, the Lord hath not called thy name Pashur, but Magor-Missabib. For thus saith the Lord, behold, I will make thee a terror to thyself. He's telling, see, here's something. Jeremiah kept on getting in trouble. He went to jail that night, thought about all of this, and the Lord told him what to tell Pashur. Here's a man that's already had you beat up and put you in jail, and God is saying, I need you to tell Pashur this. So here's what he said. Thus saith the Lord, behold, I will make thee a terror to thyself. In other words, and to all thy friends, and they shall fall by the sword of their enemies, and thine eyes shall behold it. And I will give all Judah into the hand of the king of Babylon. And he shall carry them captive into Babylon, and shall slay them with the sword. Moreover, I will deliver all the strength of this city, and all labors thereof, and all the precious things thereof, and all the treasures of the kings of Judah will I give into the hand of their enemies, which shall spoil them and take them and carry them to Babylon. And thou, Pashur, and all that dwell in thine house, guess what's going to happen to you? Shall go into captivity. And thou shalt come to Babylon, and there thou shalt die, and shalt be buried there, thou and all thy friends, to whom thou hast prophesied lies. O Lord, thou hast deceived me. This is Jeremiah now. And I was deceived. He's accusing the Lord of deceiving him. thou art stronger than I, and hast prevailed. But he says, I am in derision daily. Everyone mocketh me. O Lord, thou hast deceived me. He said in 8, for since I spake, I cried out. He said, I cried violence and spoil, because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me and a derision daily. This is Jeremiah talking to the Lord. See, after Pastor had beat him and put him in jail, and while he was in jail, the Lord had given him another word to tell Pastor. Now he's telling Pastor, you're going to be punished. You're going to go down to the king of Babylon's going to come and get you, going to take you, hold you prisoner. You're going to die down there, and all your friends going to die down there with you. It's hard to tell the ruler of the land that you're gonna suffer some punishment and still expect to come out of it without any harm. So Jeremiah know his name is mud all around that place, because he's not only given all the kings. See, God told him to go down to the gate, told him to sit there at the gate and tell them the story about the pot, that how it was going to be broken and what was going to happen to him. He made all of government mad at him. It's all right sometimes to make one or two people angry with you, but when you make the whole country angry with you. So now Jeremiah's feeling depressed. He's saying, Lord, did you deceive me? I feel like I've been deceived. He said, and I know you're stronger than I am, and you prevailed, and I'm in derision every day, and everybody's mocking me. So what he's saying is, I go in shop to get a cup of coffee, they picking at me. You know, I go down the street, and they looking at me, look at that old Jeremiah. I guess they're hissing at him. That man ain't doing nothing but stirring up trouble. That's a troublemaker going down that street. I'm sure they've called him all kinds of names. They have probably decided that they're going to meet him in the corner or in the alley one night and beat him up. Let's do that. And Jeremiah knew how they felt about him. So I don't know what derision is, but I'm pretty close to derision myself. I don't know one thing from the other, because I'm in derision. That's a good word. Let's look that up next time we get together. He said, then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. He's so upset with the Lord. He said, I'm not going to make any mention of him. You know, he called me to do all this negative preaching, and he called me to go down and tell people they're going to die, and the birds going to eat them up, and the beasts of the field. And now here I am. I'm an enemy. I just wrote the X right on my back, you know. So my name is Mud. He said, I'm not going to speak his name anymore. He's talking about the Lord. But his word was in. Now he said, then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. But his word was in my heart, mine heart, as a burning fire, shut up in my bones. And I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. You know, sometimes you might feel like you're going to go hide in a corner somewhere. But if the spirit is, if the heart is burning with the fire shut up in your bones, you can't be quiet. You got to say something. He said, for I heard the defaming of many. In other words, people were defaming his name right and left. Everywhere he walked, everywhere he went, people were saying bad things about him. All right? Then he said, I had fear on every side. I was scared somebody was going to hit me here. I already been beat up by Pastor. And it's a possibility that several more people got it out for me. He says, report, say they, and we will report it. In other words, if you start talking, we're gonna tell people. We're going to tell the kings on you. He said, all my familiars watched for my halting, saying. See, his familiars, all of the people that knew him, they watched Have you ever had anybody watching you and watching you trying to identify mistakes that you make or any type of wrong step that you take? See, I knew you weren't a Christian. You're no good. You don't do nothing but go out stirring trouble up. Jeremiah was miserable. He had a miserable life now. He had no wife to go home and talk to. He had no sister that I know of that he was able to go talk to. He didn't have an uncle. Probably his uncles and stuff turned against him too. He said, peradventure, this is what the people were saying, peradventure he will be enticed, and we shall prevail against him, and we shall take our revenge on him. So if he says anything, we can report it, and then we can stop him from doing it, and then we can entice him to do something that he shouldn't do, and we'll take revenge on it. Jeremiah said, but the Lord is with me as a mighty terrible one. Therefore, my persecutors shall stumble, and they shall not prevail. They shall be greatly ashamed, for they shall not prosper. Their everlasting confusion shall never be forgotten. But, O Lord of hosts, that triest the righteous, and seeth the reins in and the heart, let me see thy vengeance on them, for unto thee have I opened my cause. Sing unto the Lord, praise ye the Lord, for he hath delivered the soul of the poor from the hand of the evildoers. So in 5 verses, he went from, I'm not going to talk about him no more until his fire shut up in my bones, and even though I'm fearful, and even though they're saying bad things about me, even though they're waiting to take revenge on me or entice me to do something that I shouldn't be doing, I know the Lord is with me as a mighty terrible one. Therefore my persecutors shall stumble. They shall not fail. And they shall be greatly ashamed, for they shall not prosper. Their everlasting confusion shall never be forgotten. Number 12. But, O Lord of hosts, that triest the righteous, seest the reins and the heart. I'm rereading this. I know you say, she's read that before. Yeah, I have. But I got to read it again. Let me see thy vengeance on them. For unto thee have I opened my cause. Sing unto the Lord. Praise ye the Lord. For he hath delivered the soul of the poor from the hand of the evildoers. Cursed be the day now. I praised him. I said I wasn't going to talk about him. Now I'm turning to myself. Sounds like Job. Now we're coming on to a Job story. Cursed be the day wherein I was born. Let not the day wherein my mother bare me be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought tidings to my father, saying, a man-child is born unto thee, making him very glad. And let the man be as the cities which the Lord overthrew, and repenteth not. And let him hear the cry in the morning, and the shouting at noontide. Because he slew me not from the womb. In other words, he didn't let me be born stillborn. Or that my mother might have been my grave, and her womb to be always great with me. Wherefore came I forth out of the womb to see labor and sorrow. Lord, why did I have to be born to grow up, to not be able to get married, not be able to have children, not be able to be happy, and to work for you, and to suffer sorrow from rejection of all the people, no friends, no nobody, that my days should be consumed with shame. Why am I ashamed? Why would you let me be born, Lord, just to see all the work that I've done and all the sorrow that I've suffered, and that now I'm so ashamed to walk down the streets. I can't walk in the restaurants. I can't walk in the stores. They looking at me 2 and 3 times, and I see them whispering about me. Why did I come out of the womb? He's in a bad way. But Jeremiah is still going to be blessed, and Jeremiah is still going to be used by God. Jeremiah will live for many, many years, and he will see his enemies punished. I had a lot of notes, have a lot more notes here, but I'm not going to go and worry you with all of them. But I want you to remember that Jeremiah was beaten. He had to endure painful public disgrace. He wasn't only regarded as a false prophet, but also as a traitor, discouraging the people who still trusted in help from God or Egypt against Babylon. I think I explained everything about when he was smoked and how he really went into the temple to try to talk to the people that were supposed to be the Christians, and how he was put in stocks at the Benjamin gate. All of this is all about Nehemiah and the building of Jerusalem. This is amazing. Isaiah came before Jeremiah, the book of it, but Isaiah didn't live until later on. Jeremiah didn't live until later on. Isaiah prophesied all of this stuff. Okay? So when we're looking at it, like the pasture, his name was changed. And Magor Missabib, and the meaning of that, sometimes given as freedom, sometimes his pasture was supposed to be freedom and at ease and peacefulness. Magor Missabib was really a name for evil. It wasn't good. So all of these things that we're talking about, I really love the lesson tonight. And I think about what God really wants to do with us. Those that are faithful to him. He needs a lot of faithful people. He needs a lot of bold people. He needs a lot of people that's speaking up for him. And sometimes I don't know if I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, but the Lord wants us to live beyond the derision and the reproach that we receive from other people. He really wants us to live in a life where we can be a blessing to someone else. And Jeremiah's words were really serious. He said, I've been really ridiculed, and I'm trying my best to serve the Lord and do what he says do, but people just tossed him aside. He was no longer the Jeremiah that he wanted to do. So I wanted to read this to you, and then I'm going to close up. Jeremiah had to bear a painful price to remain a faithful messenger of God. On many occasions, he contemplated either giving up or changing the message. In a case like this, he had a resolution that it wasn't where it was supposed to be because it was out of sync with God. It's often been observed that Jeremiah's doubt was never expressed in public. Outwardly, he was the firm, unyielding prophet of the Lord, conveying faithfully the divine will to his people. But when he got alone with God, the tensions of his position were revealed. But his word was in his heart like a burning fire, shut up in my bones. Many times, Jeremiah wanted to give up, but he couldn't. He couldn't because he dealt with God's word. He couldn't because that word lived in his heart. He couldn't because that word burned in his heart like fire. He couldn't because that word pressed against his very being as if it were shut up in his bones, requiring great energy to hold in. I was weary of holding it back. He found out the impossibility of denying his call. He learned that it was irreversible and that God's word is irrepressible. So when God calls you to do something, that's something we need to think about. When God calls you to do something, that calling is going to stay with you. You're going to be a miserable soldier if you don't answer the call. I don't know how many of you out there that God has called to do something for him, but you're not going to be restful. You're not going to be at ease. You're going to always be troubled until you answer the call. Under the stress and strain of his sufferings, he was tempted to abandon the work, to refuse to speak anymore in the name of Jehovah. But when he attempted thus to find release from suffering in silence, it was impossible, for such silence became more intolerable than the suffering. So when he was thinking about it, when he was thinking about, I'm not going to do this anymore, he was more miserable than he was when he was doing what he was supposed to do. Think about your lives. We want to do God's service. We have sometimes been weary in God's service. But oh, it would be a great weariness if we were dismissed from it. It would be a greater weariness. To speak is an awful responsibility and weight, but not to speak would be impossible. I rest my case tonight. I thank God for being here. I thank him for all that he's done for me. I thank him for the many years that I have talked to people about him. I don't know how effective I have been, and that's not my problem. My job was to speak what he gave me to speak. And all during my life, I have tried to accomplish that feat. So I say to you, good night, everyone. To those of you who stayed with me, thank you very much. I truly hope to see you next week.